Next question, how do I stay energized and avoid burnout with the demands of ministry?
We do need to do things to help us to not burn out. And thinking through, one of the things that I do is think through what enlivens me, what makes me feel alive, what brings me life, some people would say, and making sure I have a diet of those things in the rhythm of my life. For example, that's when Frank and I were talking, and he asked if I'd be able to come down and do this. My wife and I talked, and my wife said, yes, that's the thing that brings you life. That's the thing that gets you going. And so, yes, do that. And so, like, this process for me is something that brings life. Investing in and thinking through how we can invest in the future generation of leaders and spending time with people and helping them develop, that is something that brings me life. Spending time with my family, having a rhythm where we set apart family time. We've talked about family life balance before. I also think, and pastors and caretakers are awful about these sort of things, but taking care of yourself. Making sure that you do things to try to remain healthy. I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church, and I remember, Southern Baptist pastors at the time had a reputation for eating fried chicken. And I remember when I was working in the ministry, and we had this meeting where we had 3 pastors, lead pastors, in this meeting, and there were like 8 people, and the ladies for the luncheon had made, I think, 5 or 6 whole fried chickens. And I'm pretty sure each of those pastors ate one entire fried chicken themselves. But the idea of even making sure we're healthy in what we eat, there is a time to feast and there is a time to fast, but taking care of your body, taking care of trying to do what is best for your body, getting sleep, making sure. I was talking with Frank, my wife is working with a dietitian, and she is giving ideas, and these are things that you can do to help you. One of the things that I told Frank, that she said, well, you guys need to get up and go outside and spend 2 minutes outside within 20 minutes of when the sun comes up, because you will feel better. There's something about sunlight. And it's powerful because it works and it helps, but finding those things that keep you healthy, and then also keep you healthy physically, but also bring life into those other aspects of your life.
Absolutely. I break this up into 2 parts. One is seeking inspiration will help you to avoid burnout and stay energized, and then the other one is rest and recharge. So it's vital that you, again, going back to a previous statement I made in this series on Q&A on church and ministry, it's vital that you schedule times for things that you find inspiring and things that recharge you, reset you. And that's different for every person. I have friends in ministry, they play golf. I have friends in ministry, they ride bikes. I have friends in ministry very into running, jogging, right? I have friends in ministry who love to watch television shows. I have friends in ministry who love to watch movies. Appropriate movies, obviously, but it's art. I have friends in ministry who love to listen to music. And then for the inspiration, one of the things that I have been told by many, many people who are on fire for the Lord is that this podcast inspires them. So finding a podcast that inspires you, that breathes life into you, that energizes you, right? It's a great venue, or YouTube videos or books, right? I have friends in ministry, they read for recreation.
Yep.
I don't read for recreation, but they read for recreation. To me, reading's work. So find something or things that you can do for rest, relaxation, recharge, and things that you can expose yourself to that inspire you. And build those things into your schedule. As I said before, I build time for rest and relaxation every single day. And for me, it's usually in the evenings. Sometimes it's in the afternoons. I do the bulk of my work in the mornings because that's when I have the most energy, right? So I expend that energy on work. But it's vital that you exercise good time management, as I said before. And so many leaders are just, their life is chaos. And they don't schedule things. And they allow too many irons in the fire. And it's no wonder that they're fried at some point and they've burned out. There is a chapter in 48 Laws of Spiritual Power on this very thing, if you want more on this topic. One of them is called Discern the Season. That's Law 22. Law 45 is Avoid Toxic People. That can burn you out real quick. Law 3, Beware of the Empty House. Very, very important principle there. That if overlooked, it can destroy your life. And then Law 6, Avoid Burnout. Hence the question. So that's a supplement.
And I would say also, like, the idea of being deliberate about scheduling what inspired that time for inspiration. That matters. I know personally in my ministry, I make sure that I have scheduled things. Like, one of the things last year that I did for that was the IXP. You know, that was something that was a part of me being inspired. It was a part, it was part inspiration and part respite, both. I had to be deliberate about that. I scheduled that. You know, we came down to Florida and we were here. But I make sure, and I try to do things every year in line with that, so that I have that regular rhythm of seeking those things. And they may be different every year, but it's important to schedule that. So if you don't have any idea and you happen to be between the ages of 30 and 40 of what might be an inspiration to you, check out the IXP if you're a ministry leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Pickleball is another one.
Pickleball. One of the things I do to recharge, and I told Frank about this, I play with Legos. So I enjoy it.
Beautiful.
So, and my kids enjoy it, and so it's something we get to do together too.
Awesome. All right, the final question, and this question is for me. But you're welcome to throw in here. I have listened to many of your podcasts. All right, now many. I want to underscore that, many. There are over 200 podcast episodes on this show, Christ is All, and there are over 100 episodes on the Insurgence Podcast. So 300 plus episodes. And this person says many, all right? So we got 300. And many of your books. There are 20 published books right now on my books page, frankviola.org/books. He says many, all right? But I'd like to make an observation and ask a question. Why is it nearly all of your podcast conversation partners on the Insurgence Podcast are lead pastors or seminary graduates instead of actual practitioners? Ouch, Jared. Of the things, Jared's one of my conversation partners on the Insurgence Podcast. Actual practitioners, and you're a lead pastor, and you're a seminary
graduate. Yeah.
Why is it that nearly all, and I've had 7 so far, podcast conversation partners, nearly all of them are lead pastors or seminary graduates instead of actual practitioners of the things you teach and emphasize in most of your books and teachings? And then there's a follow-up question. After I picked myself up off the floor reading this, I had to really look at it carefully. Because this is not the only person who's asked me something like this.
Yeah.
It's not common, okay? But I think he's representing a small segment of people who are somewhat familiar with my ministry. I say somewhat because he's saying many of your podcasts, that's over 300, many of your books, I've written 20 that are available. And then he says, why don't you do episodes on organic church life? And that right there tells me what he is talking about. Jared, I have only written 3 books on organic church life. And they were written many years ago. 2008, 2009, 3 books. Right? Let me read you the titles of my other books.
Yeah.
Remember, he says many of my books. 48 Laws of Spiritual Power. You're a practitioner. Hang On, Let Go. You're a practitioner. Re-Grace. You're a practitioner. Insurgence. You're definitely a practitioner. You went to the Insurgence Mastermind.
Yep.
You're also part of the Deeper Christian Life Network. Jesus Speaks. You're a practitioner. You're reading this now. You're speaking about it. The Day I Met Jesus. Jesus Now. God's favorite place on earth. Jesus of Theography. You've talked about this. Revise Us Again. Jesus Manifesto. Mm-hmm. Those are most of my books. And the new one that's going to come out, God willing, in 2025, The Untold Story of the New Testament Church, revised and expanded. That is not a book on organic church life. It's a book on the New Testament and the New Testament story, not a certain expression of church. That's not what the book is about, and not a certain theology either. And in addition to that, there are no episodes on organic church life on the Insurgence Podcast, right? We have over 130 episodes. Not one of them is on organic church. And most of the 200 plus episodes on this podcast has nothing to do with church or ecclesiology. They have to do with the subjects that I most often write about. The kingdom of God, the gospel of the kingdom, Jesus Christ, knowing Jesus Christ, revealing and unveiling Christ, spiritual transformation, spiritual power, spiritual ministry. When I read this question, you know what I think of? And these guys were before my time. They were before your time. Many of you who are listening, they will be before your time also, although some of you lived in this era. But even though they were before my time, I've always been intrigued with the old rock group, the Beatles. And I'm familiar with their catalog of music. And their first hit songs, they did them in 1963. And I'm speaking of I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You, right? Okay. Later, as they developed and matured, they never renounced those songs, right? They never said, oh, we don't stand by them anymore, don't listen to them. It wasn't that. But what they did was they moved into a totally new arena. And so you had albums like Revolver, Rubber Soul, and then after that it was Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, with many hit songs from that album. Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds, A Day in the Life, Magical Mystery Tour came out, and then you had Abbey Road, which many music experts say was their best album. You had Something on that album. After that, you had Let It Be. And so when I read this, I think of the Beatles catalog and someone saying in 1969, hey, why don't you play She Loves You and I Want to Hold Your Hand? And why don't you do music like that? Dude, that was years ago. That's our early stuff. We've moved on. We're over here. And the music that they ended up playing and creating later was much more sophisticated. And much more developed. And that's what I think of. And part of that, too, is the entire music scene had changed. This is something you had said to me. They were moving with the times. And the fact is, I don't do podcasts on organic church life. I don't write on organic church life. Why? Because the season has changed. When I wrote those 3 books way back in 2008, 2009, the interest in meeting outside the institutional church, the meeting of capturing and restoring a first century church, the expression of it was at high tide. And most of the people who are interested in it, 20s and 30s. Today, completely changed. And the only people who are really interested in it, in the masses, okay, the majority of people who are interested in it are 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and their views on the subject are all over the place. And they even attack one another and disagree with each other, and it's pretty toxic. So my point here is that I am faithful to what the Lord has given me, even in my old books, even in I Want to Hold Your Hand and She Loves You. You will see the golden thread that runs through all of my work, even to the present day, the eternal purpose of God, the centrality of Jesus Christ, the fullness of Christ. And I have been banging that drum and singing that tune ever since I began writing and speaking. And so I hope that the people who listen to this episode and listen to my answer to this question will be transmogrified to understand that it's the eternal purpose and the gospel of the kingdom and the centrality and fullness of Christ. If the season changes again, man, I will be talking about ecclesiology. but the season has not changed. And thank you for the word transmogrified. I appreciate that.
So one thing that I think I would like to add, because I have been in the seminary world at several seminaries, and I have been in the pastoral traditional church world and am in contact with a lot of people that are in there. As I have listened to your podcast, the Insurgence Podcast, your conversation partners are not what I would view as typical of seminaries and lead pastors. I know from my perspective, I think we can learn from anyone. And so even this question, I'm like, oh, I could learn some things from this question and even from this person, even if I may not agree, even if I'm like, no, I am a practitioner. But I think as I've listened to the podcast, the humility that I hear in all your conversation partners points to the fact that they are practitioners. Yeah. Points to their character, and I don't think we should say, well, we can't listen to you because you have no credentials, or you have too many credentials, or you're in the wrong setting. Because when we look to the Gospels, we see that Jesus works in unexpected ways that we don't see coming.
Yeah. And the classic example of that principle is, and that truth, is when the disciples were looking at this other bunch saying, hey, Lord, they're casting out demons, but they're not with us. Mm-hmm. And he rebuked them for having this elitist, exclusive attitude.
Yeah.
The people who I have invited to appear on the Insurgence Podcast, you being one of them, Michael Heiser being another one, and many others, we don't agree on everything.
No, we don't have
Nobody
to.
does. But in the areas that we have tackled on the gospel of the kingdom and the kingdom of God mentioned in the New Testament, we're joined at the hip in virtually all of it.
Yeah.
All right. And it doesn't matter to me what a person's credentials are. I could care less.
Yes, that doesn't matter. That shouldn't matter.
And I will just say this. I'm going to say it to make a point. All right.
Okay.
You hold a doctorate. You've never mentioned it once.
I'm not going to. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
You've never mentioned it on the air. And personally, I'm not impressed with it in terms of giving a person a greater spiritual stature. I mean, I think it's great you went through it. I don't hold any degrees in theology or ministry, and I'm very happy with that.
Yeah.
That means nothing, whether you have it or not. As you said, I'm looking at people who I can resonate with and I can have a conversation with about the kingdom of God. And every single one of my conversation partners fits that very well. I love that they're all different.
Yeah, all diverse. I mean, all from different places.
Very diverse.
It's amazing.
Not all of them are lead pastors.
No.
And not all of them are seminary graduates.
No.
A lot of them are, yes.
Yeah.
But I never even thought about that. What's so fascinating is that this question caused me to step back and say, are many of them lead pastors? I think only 3 are lead pastors. Are many of them seminary graduates? Probably most of them, but not all. But it never crossed my mind because I don't pay attention to that.
No.
I remember I was speaking at a conference, and I was one of the people who put the conference on. And I had another individual who was speaking, and he had more degrees than a thermometer. But he was one of the speakers because in one area we have a lot of commonality. And one of the people who came with him, kind of a fan, the charismatics would call him the armor bearer. He said to me privately, when you introduce the brother, the speaker, are you going to mention his degrees and his doctorate? And I said to him, actually, I never thought about it. I said, but probably not, because this audience here, it means nothing. And it doesn't. And it doesn't mean anything to me either.
Yeah.
Just because you have a doctorate in theology or ministry, it doesn't mean, to me, a hill of beans in terms of your spiritual insight, if you know the Lord, how well you know the Lord, if God has anointed you, etc., etc. It just doesn't. And so I have known, and I have friends who are doctorates, and they're very helpful, and what they have is valuable. I have others who I would say that's not the case at all.
Just
Right.
all that means is you were persistent and just kept with something and completed it.
Yeah,
that's all
what
that
it
means.
You know, and you look at people in history like Charles Spurgeon,
Yes.
A.W. Tozer, right?
Yeah.
G.
No
Campbell
formal
Morgan,
training. Yeah.
T. Austin Sparks, Watchman Nee. And these are people who did not have formal theological educations. And there's another person who fits that as well. Jesus of Nazareth. And the 12 young
apostles,
brothers who followed him wherever he went and brought the gospel to the Jewish people. And it was true for the people who Paul of Tarsus trained. Paul, although himself was theologically trained, but what did he say about it? Doesn't
rubbish,
mean
right?
yeah.
Rubbish in the King James English is not a kind. Not
It's a strong word.
It's a very strong word. We have other
Okay.
words for that today. So
It doesn't mean, as the old saying goes, it doesn't mean a toot on a tin whistle. So, anyway. Well, folks, I hope that clears up so much and the fog has now dissipated and now we're clear about what my work is about. And someday I may return to ecclesiology.
Yeah.
I do have one book in me that will pick up where the earlier books
left off.
they all go together: Pagan Christianity, Reimagining Church, and Finding Organic Church. But folks, the season for those books is not now.
Yeah.
And I don't even recommend those books to people because we're in the wrong season. The season changed. Plus, they're for a very limited audience. My other books, though, definitely. And the ones I listed off, I hope you will read and recommend them if you haven't already. But I do have one book in me that's about ecclesiology. The idea is novel, creative. I don't know of anything like it. Maybe someday, years from now, when the season changes, I will write it. We'll see. But I have other books in me that I hope to write before that. And God willing, we'll see what happens. We look to Him for grace day by day. Thanks for the questions that those of you who are in ministry have sent in. We hope this has been helpful to you. This is part of a series, and you can go back and listen to the previous episodes to get the whole picture. Until next time, God bless.